Welcome back to the Ryan Bundy Show. I'm having Brian Ladd on today. Brian's runs an amazing team, the top team in Bend, Oregon, real estate team. The reason I'm having him on mostly is to understand how he built his team and how he manages his time. He's got kids and he runs a very successful business. And we're about the same age and we both have kids, and I was very interested in seeing how he balances everything and his leadership skills. Give me, what was the trigger for you? What got you into real estate? Everybody kind of knows you in town, do a great job, but I want to know a little bit about your backstory from the initial entrance into them.
Yeah, well, so I was born into real estate in the sense that my father was a home builder. His father was a home builder, and my grandfather worked with his father in land development and home building back in the 1960s, actually after World War II, in the Chicago area. So I was born and bred into this industry, grew up on construction sites, moving lumber, cleaning sites, and schlepping material around. So it's nothing new to me. And I didn't think I was going to go into real estate. After I studied business in Colorado, I left and went and worked for Janus Mutual Funds for just long enough for me to get in an elevator and go up a high rise and say, this is not me. Mm-hmm. And so I quickly changed gears, and I mentored with and was a home builder with my father for a number of years in Colorado, did land development from ground up, land acquisition, development. And then I started transitioning more into the sales side of this when my wife and I started having kids. We wanted to find a smaller, more lifestyle-oriented town to raise our kids, and we lived in Steamboat Springs, Colorado for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And that's where I kind of sat on that fence and did some building, but that's where I focus more on the sales side, and that's the part that I always loved the most. And when I moved to Oregon, bought my first place in Bend in 2009, right in the recession. It was, Bend real estate had its teeth kicked in. It was a doom and gloom time for anyone that was here. And when I moved here, I wanted to focus on real estate. That's where my expertise laid. But for me, what I studied in school, what excited me the most was marketing and sales, but I wanted to do that on a little higher level. I didn't want to be a quote-unquote realtor. Mm-hmm. I felt that just being a middleman service person was, for me, it didn't light me up. I wanted to bring a higher level of service and understanding, and so I started working with developers, builders, whatnot. I was able to acquire the representation on Tethero back in 2012, 2013, when that was suffering as well. And then I've been able to build my real estate team. I purposely built a small team here, and I've had that going since about 2012.
Yeah, so I've always wondered, because your signs, I live in Tethero, and your signs are everywhere, right? You have so give me just a scoop on how you got that. Well, and what was going on, because I know friends who I live in Seattle, lived in Seattle, and they had houses down here. They talked about these golf communities, and then everything just kind of blew up.
Yep, and so I came with fresh eyes. So I came post-implosion of the real estate market. It was, it looked like the aftermath of a fight, and Tethero was, kind of on life support. And at that point, the original developers that were overextended were washed out. If Tethero had been launched, in 2005 and 6 as opposed to 7 going into 8, it would have been a wild success. Their average price of the lots were about $400,000 to just about $1 million. They'd had a bunch of reservations, but the delay in getting it ready, by the time they were ready to roll out Tethero, the music had stopped, and we saw the biggest, the Great Recession and the biggest implosion on real estate in the history of the U.S. The correction in real estate prices in Bend were 55%, which was bigger than the Great Depression of the 1930s across the U.S. So it was massive, and it was just ill-timed. But then I saw it with fresh eyes, and at that point there were 3 or 4 main investors that were holding different pieces of Tethero. So it was never an all-in-one. There was different debt holders holding different pieces of land in Tetherow, and at that time they were all kind of doing their own thing. And I saw it with fresh eyes, and while everyone else saw foreclosure in Tetherow in the newspapers, I saw it as, oh my goodness, they just washed a lot of debt from this. It's in a more secure position than ever. Their cost basis is now to the point where we could start selling lots to locals at $150,000. And I saw it as all opportunity. And Chris Vanderveld brought me in. I had started selling lots in Tetherow in 2011, 2012. I was bringing some builders to the table because I believed in it. And I said, let's get this thing going. Let's do some spec homes. Let's get some homes on tour homes. And as soon as we put our first home on tour homes in 2011, there had been no construction for 4 or 5 years. All of a sudden, everyone looked back to Tetherow and said, oh, it does have a heartbeat. And the sales started thereafter. And after that, Chris Vanderveld and the other developers brought me in as the developer rep for all the home sites. And I believe I had about 350 to 400 home sites. And I divested. I was able to sell those out for them over the 10 years, starting at about $150,000 a lot and working our up. When we sold the last developer site was just under $500,000 or so. But that was my big 10-year position in Tetherow. And now what I've focused on is I know and love that market, and I'm committed to serving the resales of all the custom homes that were built in that for the next decade. 10, 20 years. That's a core pillar and commitment for my team.
Yeah. Well, I get your stuff consistently. Like I think I was at another event with you, and you mentioned about when you farm, it's not like once a month.
Yeah.
It's like you better be like 4 times a month. And so I laugh every time I get your postcard.
Well, you did another one today. Yeah. So I've always felt that farming is one of those things that if done poorly, has very little effect. So I have a 6-figure budget on our farming, our physical mailings. And you're right, for our core farm, which is that swath of West Bend, which is Tree Farm, Westgate, Tetherow, Highlands, Shovelin Ridge, et cetera. There's about 800 homes in there. It's once a week mailers and it's not spammy mailers. We're always trying to deliver value, education, and that's our core farm. And if you're in it, you get it weekly.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I'm always like, we don't have a very good yard. I got little kids, so I'm like, if I sell, who should I talk to? I'm like, well, I mean, he's working it, man. I better give him a shot,
Yeah, we work hard.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, one of the biggest reasons I want to get to know you, and you got a family, we're about the same age.
Yeah,
we're in the real estate mortgage business, which is can be super time consuming and distracting for your family, right?
Yep.
You got to watch it. So tell me maybe you started this team. Were you an agent, or did you just build the team immediately, or was it because I was an LO and then I slowly built a team?
Yep, mine was pretty slow and methodical as well. I didn't want to build a team for team's sake. I wanted to build a team so that we could serve our clients consistently and reliably, number one, and then two, build a little structure of life balance in there, which, as you know, in this industry, it'll eat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year if you let it. And that's not in your best interest, obviously, but it's also not in the best interest of the clients. And what I found pretty quickly as I became more successful and started doing a lot of volume, I got up to the point where I was doing $50 or $60 million of volume on my own, even before I hired an assistant, was that there's only so many hours to the day. There's only so much fire in the belly, and it's going to blow up somewhere, either in your relationship with your spouse or your kids, or how you serve your clients. And so what we started doing is I was blessed with people like Brian Hiltz, who were early teammates of mine out at Tetherow, officially joined my team, and we started building it very methodically with transaction and contract support, marketing support, and then individual agents came on to serve very specific roles. What I found is that most agents in this business are hair on fire agents, where they get to a certain level of success just from pure determination, fire in the belly, they run out, run hard, they put together enough business, but then to sustain that is the real key. And there's a lot of burnout in this industry because of that. You get to the point where you have a couple listings out in the market, you start doing pretty well, but then you have some buyers coming in, and then when you're serving your buyers, nobody's serving your listings, and you're trying to figure out what to do for marketing, both for yourself and for your listings, and it's just your head's in about 15 different pillars. And I felt that multitasking in 2 or 3 areas is hard, in 15 areas is impossible. So we have very clearly defined spheres of practice, lists of what everyone does, so that when a client comes into our team, the way they are interacted with, the way they're followed up with, the way the transactions occur once we actually have a transaction is seamless and repeatable every single time. Systemized. Mm-hmm. And so when we built my team, I was very clear in that I was not building a team just for team's sake. I know a lot of agents that go to 100 agents and start stamping out teams in all these different markets, and that's just a money or commission grab to me. At the core of it, I wanted to maintain the most experienced agents in the market working at the highest levels, and we developed it. And what was funny is, in hindsight, it's a very similar model like a SEAL team in the military, where once you get above this magic 8 number, it starts becoming tough to manage, and individual accountability goes away. And so once you get above that number, it gets really, you need this top-down management, and it gets really awkward. And so I didn't have the desire to take it to the next level and create the infrastructure and the accountability to go to 40, 50. It just never interested me. So we have this SEAL team model. We're always 7 or 8 agents, and then the admin, marketing, and transaction support for all the agents wrapped around that.
Yeah. So it's funny. I kind of want to be careful what I say here, but there is in our industry, it's a lot of ego where it's like, I know a lot of people who close a ton of loans, but they're not even involved, but their name is on the loan, and then their volumes, and you're like, well, okay, that's great, but the quality of service is garbage.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just garbage. So, I'm just in this phase in my career. I'm 46, been doing loans forever, for 21 years, and I'm like, okay, like I got a 3 and a 6-year-old. I live in Bend. Like a lot of my business is in Washington. Like, it's like, what am I doing here? And the thing that stuck with me is what you said at the Donna Roberts event like 2 years ago. And it was, I was sitting in the outfield on my phone during my kid's baseball practice. And I'm like stressed out about this because my kids are just starting sports, and I'm like, it's 5 o'clock. Like if an agent calls me or a buyer calls me, like that's why you need that team.
Absolutely. And so you and I are at very similar phases of our lives, and you get to the point where that extra deal financially isn't worth the trade-off of being the distracted dad, being a horrible assistant coach at T-ball because you're taking deal calls when you're supposed to be throwing the ball with your kid. And so I learned some hard lessons that way. I found better balance more recently, but you're right, that if you have a good team in place, that's not an ego-based team that's based on grabbing transactions, but it's actually on service, so that you're out there trying to grow your agents that are trying to grow their business, and you're working really tight and collaboratively together, rather than just adding agents, and when they do great, and when they don't, they leave the team. And that's what probably I'm most proud of is that we've created a really good culture of consistency where agents stay on my team for years and years. And then that allows us to serve our clients the same way year after year. And that team culture has probably been the biggest learning experience for me in the last 10 years, more so than what I've learned about real estate.
The leadership part of it.
Absolutely.
So that's exactly kind of where I'm in this market was a good trigger to kind of to rotate into my next phase. It's like leadership. It's like I love doing loans. I like that process. I love the leadership of the team. But it's that like doing 100 million in loans, like that's not super attractive to me anymore like it was before. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're kind of like, I did that. And I wanted to be smart about how I save my money and all that, but at the same time, it's like it wears you out. You can only do it so many times, and the leadership growth thing is fun, but it's challenging and it's not for everyone. I see a lot of people in our positions where they've made it to the level where they're in the position they could grow a team, and they do, but they don't really have the skill set or the fire in the belly to do so, or
humility to learn a whole new skill set to keep it together. And so they start adding team members without a vision in the place for where the team's going. And if you don't have a North Star for everybody on the team, they're all going in their own direction. So to be that North Star and then to breathe life into that vision through operating procedures and structure, teams fall apart.
Sure.
And I see a lot of teams that have 100% turnover every year. And every year, the whole array of pictures of all the people on the team, it's all new team except for the one in the front. And that's not a team to me. That's a leader, and then, the minions behind them, and they're using them to generate commission for themselves.
Sure.
And so what I've done is, like you, I got to that point where volume, whatnot, didn't mean that much anymore, and it excites me more to see the careers of the agents on my team develop and see them make life-changing investments and stability to their lives and put money into kids' college education, than it does for me. And I've divested myself of a lot of the revenue of the team to allow that to happen. So I don't have, the margins on running a team like this are like a business. It's it's a fair profit margins, but it's probably a fifth of what people think when they see my volume. But what it's allowed is to invest in the sustainability of the team and the people there so they stay.
Yeah.
Because there are absolute all-stars on my team that if they were to leave my team, they're in the top 2 or 3 agents in all of Bend. The reason they stay is because all the revenue that they generate that they split with the team is put back in the team, and then we it's not a money grab. So we keep it in the kitty to continue to maintain our position in the market and go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing and involvement in the community and community events and leadership things to keep our position so that we can do this year in, year out, up market, down market.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think people can take that away because that's exactly what I did. Like I'm bypassed my commissions to keep the machine going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so that's a good feeling when you can continue to
no,
market.
And I've seen you do that. And what was funny is when I was here, to rewind, when I was first coming to Bend, an agent came up to me and said, Brian, I see you're doing a lot of marketing. Why are you doing marketing? The market's bad. It's not going to benefit you. I'm like, well, and I came here with a certain amount of available investment that I could invest to build myself. And in a down market, when I had almost no commissions, I spent all that money to create my brand within the market. And other agents were saying, hey, if I don't get a direct return on that investment today and it's not a positive, I'm not going to spend it. And it's the difference of looking at being a loan officer or a broker as a sales position or a business. And so you and I look at it like a business. And so in down markets, I invested, and then that same agent came to me in 2014, 15, 16 and said, Brian, why are you spending so much on marketing? The marketing's good, the market's good, you don't need to spend it. And I'm like, well, if you don't spend it in down markets and you don't spend it in up markets, when do you spend it? Do you spend it at that one inflection point where you can get direct ROI? That's not a business. That's a roller coaster. So it's just the commitment to the long term that a lot of agents in our businesses don't have.
For sure. I think it's just, think about investing in stocks, right? It's the same thing. It's like, I'm going to sell. I'm like, that's not a good idea, right? But human nature teaches us to protect ourselves, survival mode, and it's like when you're reinvesting and the market's down 30% and you're putting that money in, it's kind of scary. But it always pays back. It's just you don't know when.
Well, and it's not just the continual reinvestment of dollars; it's the effort. There's a lot of mortgage brokers that in 2007, 2008, they just turned the phone off, got another job for a couple of years, and then 3 or 4 years later, they surface again. They're like, hey, I'm here to be your mortgage officer. I'm like, where have you been the last 5 years? It's like, and it's like, now you want my business? And so it's that continual effort of up market, down market, changing market. There's the big National Association of Realtors settlement and procedures on how commissions are going to be disclosed and paid and whatnot. And once again, it's another one of those moments that there'll be a lot of agents that just disappear until the market figures itself out, and then they'll come back. And it's like, that's not a commitment to the industry that resonates with me.
Yeah, totally. I think we see eye to eye on that. So, time.
We're doing
20 minutes.
Yeah, we go. And if we need to let that run a little longer, okay. I've got Steve started, so we can go at least till 11. So
no, it's totally cool.
Whatever works with you.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about so much so far. And I was going to ask you, because I don't do a lot of real estate stuff yet. And this is like, I interviewed one guy, but we didn't even talk about real estate.
Yeah.
But people want to hear your opinion probably.
We can talk about real estate. Did I go far enough into family and things like that?
No.
I kind of talked around the edges of that. I'm happy to get deeper and life work balance and all that.
Yeah, so that'd be perfect. So because I need that advice.
Yeah.
Because I'm 46. I had my first kid at 41.
Okay.
40. So it's like, okay, like sports are about to start.
Yep.
Which is freaking me out.
Yeah.
Because I know it's going to be like this. So tell me how you handled it. And how old are your kids?
Well, so you and I are about the same age, but my kids are a little bit older. My first and oldest, my son, who's 17, actually went off to school last year. And then I have a 15-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old daughter. So just about a decade ahead in starting the kids and the family. But the life balance on that is not easy. A young dad who's a business entrepreneur just asked me advice, and the one thing that I told him that I wish I would have been more cognizant of earlier is don't sell your headspace outside of your productive work hours. There's always gray area and moments where you need to take care of clients, but if you put procedures in place and build the team to provide support, you don't need to give away your Friday nights at 7 p.m. and your Saturdays at 3 when you're supposed to be at the soccer game. And what I've found is that beyond emergency moments, and if there are too many emergency moments, you don't have the right structures in place, don't rent your headspace. And what I found is that when I was working a lot, and I worked a lot, where we got was not by accident. And for those that have met me in the last year or two, they're like, you have pretty good life balance, Brian. I'm like, it wasn't always that way. And the people that saw the price that I paid earlier understood kind of the depth of how deep I dug. But my regret in there would be always renting my headspace to my clients, thinking about their deals Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, whatnot, when it added very little value to actually how I was serving my clients, but it took a lot of value out of my time with my kids. And I've always looked at people who could flip that switch and go from hardcore business person to all-in, super focused dad whose kids don't feel that distraction. They don't feel your head half elsewhere. And that was something I wasn't able to do, and I'm trying to get better at. But I think a lot of that comes with a commitment to building the business that can afford that hard switch off. And if you're on call all the time mentally and doing things at all hours, I would implore you to look at your business structure and say, is it robust enough that I can do that hard switch off? Because you can't give it away forever, and eventually you'll burn out. You'll either end up in a divorce, or your kids will hate you, or you'll have regrets when you're on the backside of your career. So you have to figure it out. It's not something that you can just push to the side and continually try to, triage for your career. You need to deal with it and create the structure in place so that you can turn off and be fully available emotionally and time-wise to your family.
Yeah, and when I started doing that, it didn't change anything.
Isn't that funny?
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just like a mental thing. It's like, it's like the FOMO.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss out on a deal, but once you set the boundaries, like my calendar's blocked, so they go on the calendar. They're not going to get me after 5:30 or whatever. But,
and every once in a while you'll get a dramatic client. I had this moment with one of my agents on my team who didn't have as hard of boundaries, and a couple of years ago, her client, she called me at 9:30 at night saying the client is freaking out. They want to talk to you. So I get on the phone, and they're emotional or whatnot. And I said, very little good happens in real estate at 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night. And I'm going to help you gain some perspective. It was emotional negotiation of them trying to acquire property, whatnot. And I'm going to help you give some perspective, and then I'm going to put a hard stop to this in about 5 minutes. And they didn't like that, but then sure enough, they ended up getting the house, they calmed them down. But even if I were to make myself available at 10 p.m. to clients on Friday nights, they're not making their best and wisest decision Friday night at 10 p.m. They probably had a cup of wine, or a glass of wine or a beer. They're tired, they're worn out, and they're going to make emotional decisions. And to make wise decisions in real estate, it's done with a clear head at 8 a.m. the next morning and a cup of coffee. And so it's in their best interest to establish those boundaries as well.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's funny. I don't have any of those calls anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's when you just mentally block it out and it didn't affect anything.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting, my transition to building a bigger team. Because I had to lay a bunch of people off just like everybody else did. Mm-hmm. But getting junior loan officers would be my next step.
Yep.
And I wouldn't call it junior, but that's just the term we use in our industry. But that allowed you to, have basically people running while you're stepping back, because you're more of the marketing guy now, right?
Yeah, and I'll be involved in negotiations on our high-end deals. And like yesterday, we have a $10 million auction property. We're going to auction on a $10 million estate on the Oregon coast. I'm definitely involved in that and in the launch of that and talking to PR, speaking with our clients. So I'm available many hours a day on deals, but it's always through an agent. Okay. I always have a point person, and I think that's another key to why my team has been sustainable and reliable, is that it's my team first, me second. And there was an owner of a brokerage that came up to me and said, "Brian, you're absolutely crazy. You've worked so hard and developed all these relationships, and you're allowing your agents to work with them. They're going to build their book of business and leave." And my response was, that's a pretty scarcity set mindset. I look at the market, and even though people think I do a lot of volume, I'm still 3.5%. There's 96.5% more market out there. And honestly, if I'm not at a point where I could maintain that relationship with them anyway, why am I trying to hold on to it? And so what I've always done is, my best clients that I had worked with 6-7 times and done millions of dollars of transactions, the next time they came to me and I had a new agent on my team, I said, "You're now working with them." And honestly, if that team member ever does leave my team and that client goes with them, that good for them. They developed a relationship that I was unable to maintain and provide service for that client anyway. And that was a big mind shift in this industry. It's always like, hey, everyone always tries to protect their relationships and database, and I'm like, I'm going to allow my agents to I'm going to give them full access to my full sphere and to my database. And it's just a growth mentality, and it's a lot of agents are stuck in fear, and then what they'll continually do is take the easy deals. Then what happens is, then when the agents are on the side saying, "Hey, I'm struggling right now," and he's taking the easy deals and I'm having to fight for it, that's when they leave your team. And if they know that you're out there being the rainmaker, getting relationships and giving them to the agents that are deserving because they're working hard enough, they know that as long as you're there, you're going to do your best to provide enough business for them. And that's where, like in the junior loan position in your industry, or a buyer's agent or whatnot in my industry, if those agents don't feel that you're 100% in their best interest, in the scarcity times and the famine times, they're gone.
Yeah,
and that's how we've avoided this the churn. And there's always going to be some churn, but on a churn on my team, it's one agent every year or two, as opposed to 100% in most.
I see
teams.
That all the time. Yeah. You're just like, I don't know, the constant training. I mean, just draining, because it's so hard. Right. And
so that's why I've stayed small. Honestly, for the amount of experience that I have in this industry and the fire in my belly, I could be, running 10 teams like this, or I could be owning big brokerages. But I've been able to pour that energy all into the agents on my team, and it's rewarding. It's financially rewarding enough. I don't have desires of, flying jets and all that. And so I've created a life of stability for myself here in Bend, and it works for everybody. I just checked my ego at the door.
And I think in our industry, it's like, when is enough? Someone said that to me before, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
What's
this is years ago. I'm like, there is no number. I'm going for it, right? But then you said something before we started about at this age, and I'm like, I don't feel old, but you're starting to feel that transition of like, I don't want to chase anymore. It's like build in the team and the relationship, and the fact that they stick with you is because people. A lot of agents would think, well, they're going to go in my database and steal it, but what you're doing is you're just creating a very sticky situation for your team because they trust you.
Yeah.
Because it's just basic leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you trust them, and eventually some paths diverge, and that's life paths, and check your ego at the door. I had a coach one time, I was complaining to my coach, I said, this agent on my team could be doing 3 times the amount of volume that they're doing. They're talented, they have all this, they're just not willing to, why do they not want it? And she goes, Brian, that's a narcissistic thought. And I was like, no, it's not. I'm all in for them. And she goes, you're narcissistic if you think that you know better for them, what's best for them, more than they do for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of really munch that around in my head for a while. And I was like, you're right. There's only so much you can do. And if their path is different, great. It isn't a patron relationship. It's like I'm a servant leader to try to help them as best they can in the life position that they're in, with the life skills and desires that they have.
It's like reset your expectations, right?
Yeah.
We do that. We probably can do that in our relationships too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, why aren't you doing this?
Yeah, and then to get back to your what's enough as far as business-wise, what I've done is I've divested and tried to make a solid enough financial future with a life burn that matches that, where I don't need to chase endless dollars. I'm just trying to create a stable situation for my family.
Yeah. So
and I did a lot of that through investing in the industry, through acquisition of rental properties over the last 15 years.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So I look into the future and the same thing. It's just like, okay, I don't want to sit here and grind this whole time, but I do want to just I put myself in a position now where, okay, well, I just need to make about this much to sustain the life and live a good life. But I don't want the jets, and I'm happy with what I have. So it's been you've taught me a lot just in this short amount of time. Do you want to talk, before we hop off, do you want to talk about anything in the real estate market or anything? It's boring or what?
Well, no, real estate is never boring to me. I can get pretty wonky into the details of it.
You're very, you're different. You're very like an engineer almost, or something in your brain as a real estate agent.
Yeah,
very in depth.
Yeah, I like understanding the underlying fundamentals of what's happening, and it allows me and my team to avoid emotional responses to the market. The best example of this, and probably what I'm most proud of for my team, is how we reacted to the pandemic. So in early 2020, when everything went on hold, there were a lot of people in the industry saying this is the next real estate crash, real estate's dead, you'd be irresponsible for advising your clients to buy into this. And when we sat down and looked at the data, we felt it was the exact opposite. We're like, we have a housing shortage, the importance of house and home and a safe place to work from, and all this is going to be more important than ever. And there was a good 3 or 4 months where we were banging the drum through webinars where we had 700 people on them saying, hey guys, house is going to be more important than ever. House construction is stopping. We already have a shortage. House construction is stopping for the foreseeable future, for the next year or two. And interest rates are low. We're going to be in one of the biggest real estate runs that we've seen, when other people were wanting to jump out windows with real estate. And by maintaining the composure and understanding the fundamentals of what really affects the industry as opposed to the headlines, we're able to advise our clients. And our clients that were able to purchase in 2020, they've had 75% appreciation since then.
I bought in 20.
Yeah,
it wasn't done until 21 or something, but you're just like, whoa.
Yeah, and I don't like these big cycles. I don't think it's healthy for the market. But I'm very into understanding the underlying fundamentals that don't care, because there's always going to be an election, there's always going to be inflation or deflation or interest rate rises or interest rate falls, or there's a multitude of effects or things affecting our market, and people talk about them all the time. But out of those 20 or 30 things that people talk about, it really comes down to supply and demand, and the underlying factors creating demand and the underlying factors regarding supply. And if you can stay in that zone, you can make much better long-term decisions. And so we like to get wonky into that data.
Yeah, and I don't get into the data real hardcore, except more about the just basic supply and demand, because obviously, is it a good time to buy? And I'm like, well, I'm very cautious when I say that, because you just, I don't want somebody to lose money and come back to me. But basically, it's like there's a housing shortage.
Yep.
And until builders catch up or like something changes, we don't see it changing right now because everybody's at 3%. So what does your underlying dynamics in the market say to you right now?
So what I'm basically looking at right now is if we just say focused on the supply and demand side, the supply side, like you said, is still constrained. We're still below our peak building permits of the early 2000s. With about a 10-year chronic undersupply. We were building at 25% of needed volume for almost 10 years. And when you talk to the city says, hey, for us to have median price housing that median wage earners can earn, we would need 5,000 more homes in Bend. And that's not coming. And so when I see that little supply, for even saying nobody new moves to Bend, the fact that we have this much pent-up demand, I see that we have an undersupply. And then when I look at the demand, there's a couple things. One, I think the wave of migration of people moving to Bend because it was the next fun city, I think that is largely done.
Chilled out.
In the last 24 months, we've only had 1% positive growth in population in Bend. And there was about a 12-month period in there where I dare say negative population growth. No one wants to talk about that yet, but the wave of people moving to town has definitely slowed.
Sure.
Whether that picks up again a little bit to be determined, but it's definitely not people buying houses sight unseen or here for Saturday in from LA to buy a lot of
my people that bought from Seattle sold.
Yeah, and there was that pullback on the migration wave and the wave the other way, but it's much more stable. A lot less people coming to town. But what I'm still seeing is demand for places like Bend, and then on a macroeconomic standpoint, where the average millennial right now is age 29, something like that, 28, 29. Peak home buying years are 31 to 35.
Yeah.
And it's a big millennial wave.
Big, yeah.
And so they're all entering their peak home buying years right now. They've all had the kids. And so I see continued demand. And the baby boom generation on the other end of it isn't letting go of the homes like everyone thought. So I see the demand for the next, say, 3 to 5 years where supply is still going to be under the demand that we have.
Yeah.
If we start saying 5, 10, 15 years and say, okay, the baby boomers start going from 2 and 3 houses down to 1 and downsizing to smaller houses, opening that inventory to the millennials and the Ys and the Zs and all that.
Yeah.
Theoretically, we could be in a much more balanced supply and demand 10 years from now, TBD.
Yeah.
But right now, I still see that it's a supply constrained market.
Yeah, I was reading something about the boomers and the millennials have a huge. We're like one of the only countries that don't have a demographic issue in the next generation, right?
Yeah.
It's like later, but we have time to work through it and see the other countries fumble and stumble.
Yeah, when you look at the growth curves of countries, there's quite a bit of high population, and then it's slowing down for sure, but I still see that we've got a fundamental undersupply for the next 5-10 years in the U.S.
Yeah, it's just interesting because that's people, well, this is going to happen. I go, this is supply and demand.
Yeah.
Like it just comes, you can talk about all this other stuff, but what you read in the media, but there was an article from some CEO read it on Forbes that she was saying that, well, we're going to see massive deflation on housing. And I go, but when?
Yeah.
They didn't say when. She just says it's going to happen. I'm like, okay, well, maybe when the boomers go, in 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And the difference is when people ask me, hey, is it a good time to buy? I'm like, well, let's talk about you. Yeah. And they're like, well, I don't want to talk about me. And I'm like, well, it matters because the people that I see get hurt in real estate are people that are over leveraged and don't have a long enough vision. And if anyone's saying, hey, if prices don't go up and I need to sell in the next 1 or 2 years and house prices were to go down 5 or 10, my life blows up, they shouldn't be homeowners, or they're not financially in the position to be homeowners. But what I've seen is that even at the people that bought at the absolute peak before the real estate market fell off the cliff in February 2007, were made whole by about 2014, 15. And that's a big gap to bridge. But they were made whole. And in the meantime, they paid down a lot of principal on their loan. They had a stable place to live, and they were good. The people that got, the people that were hurt were people that were over leveraged, bought short-term adjustable rate mortgages that were resetting at a time where they couldn't afford it, and they were hurt. Especially a lot of the speculator investors. And I absolutely hate speculator investors in our market. And when rent rates went down, vacancy rate went up, and they took a 100% loan, and they couldn't get someone for a couple months in that rental, and it was foreclosed. That's what screws up the real estate market. They were the ones that hurt. Those were the people that that's what everyone was talking about. And it was tough for a lot of wage earners that bought with big loans in 2007, they lost a job. That was very painful for them. But for anybody that stayed kind of in their zone of saying, hey, I'm going to put at least 20-25% down, I have enough in reserves that if I have to switch jobs, I can still continue to pay it. Those people weathered that storm just fine.
Yeah, they're doing
and
really
it's
well.
and it's that greed word that once the G word, once that greed infiltrates the market, that's when poor decisions are made. And when I can sit down and be like, hey, I look at real estate as a minimum of 3 to 5 year play, if not 5 to 10 year or longer. And if you're looking at it with a shorter horizon, you're not looking at it through the same lens as I am. You're looking at it as a speculative investment rather than a part of your financial portfolio or foundation in life. So we're looking at it completely differently. So I'm saying, to be honest, I'm not even sure where housing prices are going to go in the next 6 to 12 months. But anytime that I've owned a property in the last 25 years, I can't remember what the prices did in the subsequent 3 or 6 or 12 months.
Yeah, they just
because it all gets averaged out. It's like trying to buy stock only at the troughs and sell at the peaks. It's impossible. And so it's just trying not to get overextended in your personal financial picture. And that's tough right now because housing prices are so tough. So people feel that need to stretch to get in. And that's where I think we need some big policy changes for first-time buyers, more supply, less issues on builders building that, more subsidies from the local municipalities, whatever it needs to be to make more workforce housing so people don't have to over leverage their life to get into their first house, so that when they lose their job, they blow up. Now they've had a foreclosure on their record and their whole financial picture is dead for 10 years. First-time home buyers shouldn't be exposed to that.
Yeah, no, it's a good. I heard something about the government talking about we're coming out with some stuff for first-time home buyers. And I'm like, well, I have no idea what that's going to look like.
Oh, it's going to, the Biden is proposing a $10,000 credit or whatever.
Is that really a game changer?
I just don't think it's a game changer.
No.
I think it's a chronic undersupply, and I'm not a big growth guy. I like to see very planned growth, but we have made so many regulations on providing housing over the last 20 years that we're in our own way of meeting the needs of our people.
Yeah, and that happens, right? Too much regulation just slows everything down. And
and I believe in the Oregon land use laws. I believe in that things have to be looked at through the eyes of transportation and environment and all those things as well. But I think it's a time, and I know Tina Kotick's actually working on a big bill in this regard for Oregon to try to fast track some development, because their goal was to provide an additional 35,000 homes, I think, in Oregon in 2024. They understand the shortage that we have.
Yeah, it's interesting, and everybody that I talk to, almost everybody thinks about this as an investment.
Yeah.
So I try to take them off. I'm like, look, well, what's your goal? You're gonna have a family. Like, how long are you gonna keep this house?
Yeah.
Well, but most people are about 5 years. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. So we can look at. Don't worry about the prices that much.
Yeah.
But if they come to me and like, I want to, make money on this in 2 or 3 years, I'm like, well, that's speculating for sure.
Yeah,
but people do it. Do you think there's a mind shift in our country about like how we look at real estate?
Well, it's an interesting one. And I always try to tell my clients, I'm like, your primary residence is an asset, can be a liability, possibly an investment. But a second home that you purchase as a rental property that has tenants, that's an investment. Your primary residence, keep it pretty hemmed in. I say it has more to do with where you want to build your kids' playground. And I think homeownership is essential for building financial wealth. It's not because it's a speculative investment that's going to double in value all the time. It's because you're fixed in place, you're committed to your community, it's forced savings.
Yes.
through your monthly payment as opposed to going to rent. You know, however uncomfortable that is, you know, if you look at the graphs of personal wealth of homeowners versus renters over time, homeowners always win, even though you look at the primary house and it's not always the main driver, but it's a factor.
But it changes your subconscious and life.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I tell people, I go, once you become a homeowner, you're going to make more money. Things are going to get better generally, right?
Yeah. And so, yes, it can be an investment if you're willing to commit to it for the longer term.
Sure.
When people look at it as an investment thinking that they're going to flip it in a year or two, that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And they're playing with the stability of their family and where their kids sleep as a speculative investment. And that really scares me. And those are clients that I choose not to work with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, cool. I think we're running up on time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What else?
You made it easy because you have all this data. I just let you roll.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's awesome.
I've done enough webinars and stuff. I could throw up for 8 hours.
No, it's good.
What else? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think I wanted to cover. Well, I got a good. I think I'm good. I really wanted to talk about team building and life balance. That was big because I think you've done a great job with that.
Yeah.
The team leadership, and you gave us a nugget on housing market and the fundamentals, which are really basic.
Yeah. I try not to get too caught up into Fed policy and all that. It's like,
people, what's the Fed doing? I try to dumb it down and this like, I don't want them to feel bad for not understanding it, but at the same time, it's like.
I mean, do we want to talk about the spread between the 10-year treasuries and the whatever? And and what are the inflationary factors making it a 2.5-point spread as opposed to a point? Like, I don't, if that's what we're talking about, you've lost focus.
Yeah, well, my rate updates, some people, their rate updates, I send rate updates weekly, and they're talking about this and that, and these charts, and I'm like, my rate updates are, we still have a supply issue, which is keeping prices high.
Yeah.
The 10-year treasury yield, did this, but if you get granular like that, it's just like, nobody knows what that stuff's going to do.